Hey everybody, this is Mark B. writing. Today's topics for GVN Live include us talking about a really old game company with really broad and wonderful ideas who was incredibly incapable of fulfilling them. And also, I'm going to completely lose my mind at the beginning of the show. So let's get started.
Hello, everybody. This is Fight Club Hubs, and welcome to GVN Live. Thank you, Mark, for the intro. And with me, of course, is also Janice. How are you how are you two today? We don't have Nick.
I just got up from nap, so I guess I'm okay.
Yeah.
Mark, sleepy boy.
Yeah. Did you have a good nap?
It was okay.
It was okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say? What would you rate your nap?
I don't know, it was alright. I guess maybe a 7.
Okay, that's a good nap. Okay, so I mean, without many pleasantries aside, Mark, you just got to get something off your chest. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so all right. I kind of want to highlight this as sort of a example of, for lack of a better way of attempting to explain it, I kind of want to use this as an example of talking about basically how the games journalism industry, the games journalism side of things, is kind of screwed. And it's not any one particular person's fault, obviously, but the thing that has been done, the thing that this is the example of, I should say, is definitely not a great look for any organization to pull. And I don't think the people in question feel particularly embarrassed about it per se, which is not great. But it's definitely a sign of how far we've fallen and why people get angry at games journalists that I kind of wish didn't exist, more or less. So what I'm talking about is a couple of days ago, Rock Paper Shotgun released an article on their website featuring what could essentially be described as a best of whatever list. In this particular case, it was the list of the best Final Fantasy games to appear on the PC. They weren't super clear about that, but that was their intention. They just dubbed it the best of Final Fantasy. Okay, fine. Best of lists are usually intended to be a way to get heat on your website. Let's just call it what it is. They are generally designed to stir up conversation around your particular list alongside other people's lists. Back when they were originally conceived, they were almost certainly just intended as a way to stir up conversation. In this day and age, a lot of people use them to stir up controversy, for better or for worse. I don't have an opinion necessarily on the opinions that were espoused in the article. I want to be clear. I don't agree with them, but I'm at an age where that doesn't matter. I'm not gonna throw shade at somebody because I don't care about opinions. Everybody has an opinion. Oh no, if you don't like that opinion, if that opinion's not good or whatever, if I don't agree with that opinion, it doesn't make a difference. The article in question was clearly kind of rushed, though. The writers in question didn't really have a reason to release it. That is to say, it wasn't released in time with a particular event. They didn't push it out to mark any sort of specific occasion. They didn't put it out there because a specific thing happened. They weren't doing it as some type of anniversary or alongside a specific release, whatever. They just put this particular article out because. And because of that, it's kind of a little damning that in a couple of cases the stuff that they write indicates they literally didn't play games on the list. At one point they quite literally say, we have never played Final Fantasy VI, but they put it on their list. And it's kind of like, why would you include something that you've never tried, you've never played? I find this to be personally galling because I don't get paid to do this. You know, I don't have a Patreon. I don't have a full-time job in the gaming industry. So for me, I would put in that extra effort. I would put in that time to test out the stuff that I'm talking about, to play the games that I'm talking about. But as Nick had pointed out, he felt that the problem was probably more of a case of them having to meet deadlines that they couldn't possibly get everything done within. And you know what? I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. This is probably a problem where they have a deadline they have to meet in order to ensure that there is content up on the Rock Paper Shotgun website. You know, a website that I run, or a website that is run by a couple of my friends where I'm not making money off of it, I don't have any taskmasters that I'm a slave to. They do. They have advertisers they have to answer to. They have corporate owners they have to answer to. So it's very possible that this article exists because they had to write something in order to get content onto the site, to get content onto that webpage, which kind of sucks. You know, you have to put content out every day. You have to put content out constantly. So you may not be able to put in that kind of energy, that kind of effort to get content right the first time. We talk about that with regular journalism a lot. You know, John Oliver did a segment in Last Week Tonight talking about this kind of a thing for regular journalism. But it's clear that it also happens in games journalism, that people will just throw out an article because they have a deadline to meet. You know, for as much as people kind of shit on Ben Kuchera over at Polygon for some of the stuff that he writes, he's a slave to the same taskmasters, and it sucks. But then there's the Twitter side of the argument, as Nick has pointed out in the chat. The Twitter of Rock Paper Shotgun could have just let this go as, here's an article that we're going to post. Think about it whatever you will. Let's move on with our day. But it is relatively apparent that who's ever running the Twitter for Rock Paper Shotgun is either being encouraged to do dumb shit by their corporate taskmasters at best, or is just kind of a jerk. Sorry, you're kind of a jerk, maybe. When the article initially came out on March 2nd, they released the article, and then knowing that there would probably be some controversy associated with it, they wrote, "Don't add us" underneath of it. Which is, for those who don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, the universal vernacular of "come at me, bro." Okay. Not great, but whatever. The following day, however, they then released a Twitter statement of sorts because one of the Final Fantasy games going on sale, saying, quote, "We ranked the best Final Fantasy games available on PC, and the internet agrees we got the whole list right." I do want to note that it's interesting that for a Twitter feed with 200,000 subscribers, nobody interacts with it. Like, this is one of the more popular, unpopular Twitter feeds I've ever seen. But then I've also heard that Rock Paper Shotgun has a reputation for actively banning the shit out of people for any type of, any type of conversation they might have as such. Not that that's without merit. Like, I've been on the internet long enough to see how awful people can be. Let's be clear. But I do want to note it's very possible that their Twitter feed may just not get a lot of interaction because they ban a lot of people. Who knows? The point is that nobody really has interacted with this statement, and all those who have at this point have basically said, LOL WTF. But the Twitter feed is basically an attempt to further try and garner heat onto this article, to further try and generate additional controversy. As Nick had noted, this article could have just been a thing that the website crapped out to fulfill content and could have gone away inside of a day. But the Twitter feed actively attempted to bring it back the following day and is purposefully being confrontational to try and generate controversy. So that's where we are right now. And I really feel like it's frustrating, especially because, and I hate drawing attention to this, but it is kind of a thing that does need to be mentioned, even though it sucks. One of the writers is a young woman named Catherine. I don't personally read Rock, Paper, Shotgun. Sorry, I don't. I don't. So I don't know who Catherine is, I'm afraid. She's probably a good writer. She's probably a nice person. But we live in a society, games journalism-wise, where women in games journalism have a big spotlight shined on them a lot. And it sucks, but it's kind of where we are. So it does sort of behoove women in games journalism to not be in this situation where you're attached to crap. And that's kind of a problem. Like, there's the difference between, like, if a male journalist is bad, it's this journalist is bad. If a female journalist is bad, it's all women are bad. It sucks, and I really wish it wasn't that way. Let me be clear. But that's what happens a lot of the time. The point that I'm making is that when you're attached to an article like this, where you clearly admit that you didn't do the work, you didn't do the research, and then the site's Twitter feed is desperately trying to make it into a thing, Gretchen, that's hurting the conversation on top of everything else for women in games journalism, which sucks on a lot of levels. It sucks that, people can't be afforded the opportunity to make those kind of mistakes. But it also sucks that, this kind of an article can hurt people in this position. I wish that wasn't the case, but I do feel as though that's kind of a thing that has to be pointed out, even though for the umpteenth time, I really fucking don't like it. But I mean, yeah, that's what I'm kind of starting with here. It sucks and it's frustrating, and I really wish it didn't suck and it wasn't as frustrating as it is. But this is kind of an example of where writers are. And I mean, I've shown this to a bunch of different people, not just the folks here at GVN Live. I've shown it to people inside and outside of the industry. And I feel like one of the more interesting points to come up with here is something I showed to a friend of mine in the industry, who shall remain nameless, who had basically said that, like, this was a thing that was really frustrating to them because people in the field who lack base curiosity for video gaming frustrates them deeply. In the Final Fantasy VI entry, both writers indicate that they've never played the game. And one of them actively indicates they will never play the game until it gets a 3D update. My friend who shall remain nameless's argument was nobody really wanted to figure out on the site that they wrote for why people like certain kinds of games. Nobody really wanted to figure out why people like Dynasty Warriors. Nobody really wanted to figure out why people like Monster Hunter. Nobody really wanted to figure out why people like League of Legends. That wasn't something that they wanted to devote time to. That person had to sit down and figure it out for themselves when discussing these topics. And that sucks. You know, that we exist in a situation where people who are actual literal journalists in the field don't have that kind of intellectual curiosity where they personally want to figure this stuff out. I hate that. And I hate that we're in a position that is the norm in some cases. And I kind of wanted to just take a moment to talk about that. Like, I don't have an opinion on Rock Paper Shotgun as a website. They have a reputation for being fine-ish. I'm sure that a lot of the people who work there are great. I guess they're probably fine. I've honestly never been a big reader. I apologize. But it sucks that we're in a position where they feel obligated to release an article like this from people who are kind of just not very curious about stuff that came before in gaming, where they indicate that they haven't done the research, and then the Twitter is going to just keep trying to beat it over because it's semi-controversial viewpoint-wise, and they want to generate those anger clicks. It sucks, and I really wish that we weren't in this position. So, that's it. That's all I got.
All right, so speaking of things that suck, let's segue to your favorite company of all time, Mark. Konami. Yay. Yep. Whoop the fucking... Yeah, so,
I'm gonna stop you right there, Hubs.
What?
Because according to Japan, it is not the worst, actually.
You cut out.
Well, they are not fans of the idea of what is going on with what happened with Hideo Kojima. It is apparently the #1 top-selling game of the week of the 19th to the 25th in Japan, beating out Monster Hunter World, who held that spot for over a month.
Konami still sucks.
I mean, look, I get it.
Let's look at what they're doing now. The latest thing, I mean, as if a couple years ago they weren't, just digging their ditch deeper. Now they're just adding, they're just sizing their coffin up now. Konami decided to do probably the dumbest thing ever, and that is charge people for a second save file in their new game, Metal Gear Survive. And yeah, sure, that game just beat out Monster Hunter World in sales for this week. It's just that, what the fuck?
Scummy tactics not aside, I get that. It to them, adding an additional save slot seems like a little minuscule thing. Charging $10 for it is a totally different thing. The amount of money that they make from other games, such as and I will say that it is heavily pushed on their Twitter page. Mm-hmm. For Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game in general, the franchise, makes them more than enough money for anything else they do. Mm-hmm. It just does. It helps to sustain a large chunk of not just their video games, but just themselves as a company. The microtransactions that they do through that game alone, I'm sure, support a large amount of what they're attempting to do on other fronts. And when they have the ability to push this kind of number out and basically say, here, we're going to charge you $10, have an extra save slot, it's like, why give us a save slot in the first place? That it doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, that sounds like something Capcom would do with their Resident Evil Mercenaries game for the 3DS. Oh, wait, there's no extra save slot, and you can't delete your save game. You have... That's bad, only now you want to charge people. That's like holding people fucking hostage.
It definitely could be. I mean, I think my biggest issue with a lot of what people are saying is that while the tactics of the company are bad, it's giving the game, which is actually getting relatively decent views overall as a game, kind of a negative light. And then it sucks because while I get that this isn't Kojima, and I understand that people are up in arms that it's not Kojima, it's still Metal Gear, but it's zombie survival horror. Well, there's the rub. That's the rub. People don't get that. Like, it is in its own right still a good game. It's just the problem ends up being that the name Konami is attached to it. The name Metal Gear is attached to it. And because of all of that, you have a bunch of really angry nerds who are sitting behind their armchairs going, ooh, it's Konami and they screwed Kojima. This is a bad game. And they just outset didn't like the idea of what was going on. But on its surface, there's a lot of people who are massive Konami haters who actually didn't give this game a fair shake. It's really not as bad as a lot of people give it credit for.
I'm not
Sure,
gonna...
the combat can be a little clunky. Sure, some of the initial onset of the game could be kind of grindy, but it's like Fortnite was grindy too. I mean, so what are you gonna do? But
I want to actually interject there for a second.
Sure.
I've talked to friend of the podcast, Mr. J Rose, about the game a lot. I have not played the game, and I want to absolutely note I have not played the game. So take this opinion for what you will. But Mr. J Rose has played both Fortnite and Metal Gear Survive quite a bit, and he has told me as well. It's not as bad as everyone's saying, but it is. Let us not fucking besmirch the name of Fortnite by comparing it to this game. Like, Fortnite just has some mild, inconsistent design choices. This game, while not terrible, ain't great either.
No. There is a lot of tedium. I won't deny that. There's a lot of tedium in Fortnite, but the tedium in Fortnite is based around an actual completion of objectives. It has a semblance and a feel of accomplishment when you actually are able to protect your core. Metal Gear Survive is tedious to be tedious from what it feels like. And a lot of reviewers and a lot of people that I know that aren't reviewers, that are just gamers, have said the same thing about this. Yes, the game is a little clunky. The only reason I use Fortnite as an example is it's really the only game so far that has any sort of semblance to what you're doing in Metal Gear Survive.
There's a certain amount of Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare 2 type stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the baseline I get with this, though, is it's like, if this game specifically didn't have the Metal Gear name on it and didn't have Konami on it, it probably would have been a lot bigger success.
Or it'd be an indie darling.
It would not be an indie darling. Like, here's the thing that this kind of comes to mind with me on. I haven't played the game, as I said. So everything I am taking away from this is entirely hearsay from a lot of different people who are talking about this game. I don't know anybody who hates this game. Nobody. I don't know anybody who likes this game either, is the problem. Most people have indicated that it is The engine isn't really suited to the kind of melee attacks you have to perform, and the game is heavily focused around its melee in a lot of cases, which isn't a good look. There are some neat ideas, but ultimately a lot of the ideas in the game are just either bad in general or badly executed or what have you. It is not a good game. However, it is worth noting that for people who are arguing, it's okay, the response from the public is terrible. A lot of people are showing up in the comments of reviews, like this happened over at GameSpot, I know for a fact. They're showing up in the comments of reviews where the game gets like a 5, and they're like, fuck you, you're a Konami fanboy, this game is a 2. Like, really? Like, they haven't played the game either, they're just mad.
They're just bad, right? And that seems to be the general consensus about it. This is, while Konami itself might be a scumbag company for their tactics and the things that they're doing, cough cough, $10 save slot. The game itself is not good or bad. It is at best a mediocre attempt at joining into the idea of the PvE survival horror build a base kind of mentality. Honestly, my opinion on this, from what little I have gotten a chance to play of, this is a $40 Metal Gear Solid 5 mod. Why am I spending this kind of money on something when they could have just integrated it directly into the Metal Gear Solid 5 engine? When
Because
they could have patched it into something like that. Exactly. Because Konami wants the money. And it's not like they're not getting enough money in the first place.
It is a sniveling little game.
It really is. And that's what I'm getting at. It's just like, this is basically a mod. This is an add-on. This is DLC. This is not $40. I mean, it's considered AAA because it's released by Konami, and that's the only reason. Even then, I'm still not going to spend $40 on something that I wouldn't even think about spending $10 on, let alone an extra $10 to get the save slot, because that makes it the AAA title base price that you would normally expect it to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even think Konami is necessarily considering it to be a AAA type experience. I don't think they're pointing at it as being a AAA title so much as they are trying to wring every bit of blood out of the stone they can possibly get. For better or for worse. And let's be clear, in this case, most of it is worse.
Mega Man, anyone?
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to do it to the boy, but think about it logically. This is basically the same thing that happened. When Inafune left, they milked Mega Man until they just got bored with it. And that's the same thing Konami is going to do. Only Konami's never going to get bored with it. Because they know that every single time, somebody does something and it has the Metal Gear name on it, they're going to have controversy, and they don't care. They want it. To me,
they want the controversy.
Like. They don't want
attracts people.
They want the flame wars. They want people to see the Konami name because they want people to also play Duel Links. They want other people to also play the other games that they've got. Bomberman, for crying out loud. They've got all of these other titles, all these other franchises that are languishing under the Konami name. Which, by the way, Bomberman is still one of my favorite games of all time, simply just because it's simplicity. But that and it's a brutal party game, but what are you going to do? The idea of what Konami is doing and how shady or unshady people would think that the actual business practices are, I honestly don't. I mean, I like the games. I don't play the games for the creators. I don't play the games for the console. I play games to play games. And I review and talk and show people games because I enjoy them and I think other people would enjoy them, and I think that the games are well put together. Unfortunately, however, it comes down to a fact of there's a lot of other shady shit going down here that some people just don't understand or don't want to understand, because the only thing they see is the surface issue, which is it's Konami. They screwed over Kojima. They wouldn't let him even get the award at the Game Awards. They're a terrible company. Therefore, it's a terrible game.
Right, and I mean, to be fair, it is Konami. They are a terrible company, but
True.
It deserves to be noted that not for this. This is not a terrible game. It's just a game. It's a game that sucks contextually and shouldn't exist the way that it does, but it's still just a game.
Yep.
Why don't you weigh in on the subs?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I'm not a fan of Konami these days. I mean, they didn't do a good job in handling their Castlevania franchise after they had to, redo it, and then just the whole fiasco with how they handled Kojima and what he wanted to do, and pretty much just making him work like he was in a sweatshop. Truthfully, I haven't played any of the Metal Gear games after the second, so I just don't have any interest in the franchise. I did pick up Metal Gear Rising a couple years ago from 5 and Below, brand new, but I haven't opened it because it was under $5. What the fuck?
I mean,
after that, I have no interest in Metal Gear Survival. It doesn't look like the game that kind of interests me. I'm not going to knock it because, oh no, Konami fucked over Kojima. I'm not going to knock it because, oh no, it's a zombie survival horror game. We don't have a billion of those already. I'm just not interested in the game, and I'm not interested in the company that put it out, because even though they put out a new Bomberman game for the Switch that I enjoy, it's Konami, and they've soured their relationship with me. They were a company that I enjoyed in the 90s, in the late 80s, the early 2000s, and then they just went butt-fuck crazy with, public relations and how they treat their employees and how they treat their IPs. And it's just like, you know what? Okay, hey, Metal Gear Survival. Okay, that's nice. Carry on.
I mean, and I look at it this way too: is they have a lot of languishing franchises, like, whatever happened to Gradius?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they have a lot of IPs they're sitting on, and they'd rather go and make pachinko games now.
This has kind of always been Konami's MO.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Bandai Namco and Tecmo. So what are you gonna do?
It's kind of always been Konami's MO as to how they do stuff. They will get a franchise to be a certain degree of popular with the games that they release, and then what they'll basically do is they'll hand off those games to somebody else, and they'll say, well, you make these games for a while, and they'll make whatever amount of money they're going to make off of those games in that way until those games aren't good anymore and aren't making money anymore. They've been doing that since the 90s. That happened with Contra. That happened with Gradius. That happened with Silent Hill. That's now, to a certain extent, it is happening and probably will continue to happen with Metal Gear Survive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just how they do, for better or for worse. And the problem there is that we're kind of sort of in the position where they're just going to keep doing that because it gets them whatever amount of attention, whatever amount of money, for lack of a better way of explaining it. So, like, they're just going to keep pushing this stuff out because, oh well, whatever.
Yep, and it's just like there's a couple of other companies that do that. Capcom will eventually, pull the plug on IPs if it doesn't do well enough for them. I mean, they've done that to Mega Man at least 2 or 3 times.
Well, I mean, they announced 11, so
Yeah, I mean, they've been sitting on that for at least a couple of years, though. If you follow the developers,
I have
blog,
been.
yeah,
no, trust me.
No. So, and then the guy that they have. And the guy that they have that's in charge of Mega Man 11 actually makes me super excited with the way he went about the project with him and his. He made every single person on the team play all the old Mega Man games just to get a feel for it and see what they can bring to 11, which I think is good, because there's probably a lot of young developers that have never played the classic Mega Man games, so now they got. All that aesthetics.
Well, so the thing is he has a lot of passion, and it's also because he knows. I mean, he and Inafune worked on the series before together.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why he has the passion for Mega Man that he does, and then the fact that they've given somebody like him the ability to basically make 11 his passion project means that, well, what we saw when they initially announced it may not be the final product. There may be a lot of changes before it actually comes out. There may be a lot of fan input now that we all know that it's a thing that's actually going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I have yet to see what the Robot Masters look like. That could be exciting right there.
I mean, there's a lot of things that could make it exciting, but it really harkens back to the idea of a lot of the big, and I use this sort of in the same light I use like the big three. When you say the big three, you know what I'm talking about. You're talking about Microsoft, you're talking about Sony, you're talking about Nintendo, because we're talking about the consoles. When I talk about the big four, I'm talking about Namco, Konami, Tecmo, and Bandai in general.
You were about to sound like you were about to say Sega. I was like, no, Sega's not in the conversation.
No, Sega hasn't been in the conversation for years. However,
they're trying.
They are trying, especially but
the rumor that they might get bought by Microsoft. They have a big announcement coming up, I think, in a couple weeks.
Know about that. I mean, that's a good possibility. Papa
they were.
Sonic left Sega for Square Enix, so who's to say what's actually going to Sega makes me sad because as much as I love Sega and I love the IPs and I love the franchises, they're just not what they used to be. But
Sega,
if they can get the attention that they need from a larger company like, say, Microsoft, there are languishing IPs in the Sega architecture that could very well see the light of day coming very, very soon, especially since Microsoft is still in the ideal market for, hey, we used to have an MMO. We might like to do something about that PSO2 thing that we.
I was just about to say that maybe they were going up to them like, "Hey,
hey,
we'll publish that in North
remember
America for you." Hey, remember Fantasy? Remember Fantasy Online for the original Xbox? Yeah, can you do something about that?
We're gonna see about maybe putting it out on the Xbox One and Windows 10. That's a thing.
Okay, but back to Konami. Yeah.
When you think about the older companies and those big companies that had like massive franchises, and anytime you had one of the consoles, you had one of their games. You either had a Konami game or you had a Capcom game that you were always playing. And Konami was synonymous with like arcade style games. And so a lot of it really came down to, I think a lot of this is them still clinging to that arcade roots. The more quarters you pump into it, the more money that they're going to make, the more fun you're going to have. And that's a mindset that I think Konami really needs to shut down because they're the only ones that are still doing it. Capcom dumped that years ago.
And for Namco Bandai, it's just a side project, to be honest.
Exactly.
Or a place for them to test their new IPs and rhythm games.
Or the fact that they're still the only ones that continue to hold the Dragon Ball franchise. So that's a thing.
Yeah.
To them, it's not about the money, it's about the IP, it's about the player base. And that's something that's sorely missed in a lot of the older companies from the late 80s and early 90s, is that Konami just doesn't feel to the regular gamer, to somebody like me, to somebody like you, to Mark, who do this for fun, and we don't get paid to do this kind of stuff, but to see what Konami does and to hear how they treat people and to see how, not just like employees, but people like us, players, and see how they treat us when this kind of stuff happens, it's like, I don't really think I care anymore about Konami. I mean, sure, Yu-Gi-Oh's a thing, but that, to me, that feels like that's the only thing they actually have going for them anymore.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like that's sort of where it has come to, where a year or two ago it was hashtag fuck Konami, haha, let's all laugh along with, Jim Sterling about what a bunch of shitheads these people are, and now it's just kind of like, yeah, I don't care about Konami, I don't care that they're fucking up, I don't care about what they're doing anymore. It's just like, Jim can continue to release this kind of stuff because it gets him boosts and things like that, and he should. It's part of a great business model for him. But for me, it's just kind of like, I'm honestly content to just let Konami die.
I think that's what needs to happen.
And who do you think will get the IPs? What companies do you think would be best suited for certain IPs? Well, this could be a fun topic right here. Segueing.
I think we could take an entire show for something like that. What would happen if Konami went bankrupt and all their IPs went to other companies?
Mm-hmm. Who gets the Castlevania IP?
Bandai Namco in a heartbeat. I don't see anybody else doing it. And you know why? Because at that point, they can re-partner with Toei and just go back to town. I mean, they've already got the series on Netflix. Why not renegotiate that and get Toei to help with them too? Because Toei and Bandai Namco already gets that. I mean, that makes sense. The Castlevania is the first. They'd be the first to bet.
Now, Konami owns the Hudson Soft library. Who would be getting that? I feel like Namco would also swallow that up, or maybe Capcom would.
I think that's a toss-up between Namco and Capcom, simply just because that's really an arcade darling. Like, Bomberman's an arcade darling. Even though it's not an arcade game, it's an arcade darling because of the cute characters, franchise baseline. It's a party game, and, I mean, Capcom's already been known for other previous party titles that have done very well that just were honestly on the wrong system at the wrong system at the wrong time. I'm looking at you, Power Stone. I'm sad. I love you. Please come back, Capcom, please.
Yes.
But I mean, that to me, that seems like the Bomberman and the Hudson Soft library is right up Capcom's alley.
Now for the big one, who gets Yu-Gi-Oh? Who
Activision
wants
Blizzard.
you? Who?
Activision
Blizzard.
They
Oh,
will
jeez.
they will destroy that. They will eat that up and destroy it because of Hearthstone. Period.
Yeah.
They will eat it up. They'll take the assets. They'll revamp the entire Hearthstone UI with all of the assets and turn everything from Yu-Gi-Oh into Hearthstone. Buy Yu-Gi-Oh packs. Get codes to get free packs of Hearthstone, and vice versa. Get free packs from Get packs in Hearthstone for packs in Duel Links, and eventually, slowly but surely, they slow down the support and the pack release, and Yu-Gi-Oh dies, and they allow the franchise and the media to basically rebuild the physical World of Warcraft trading card game that was a thing that, Upper Deck had for a while, and then Cryptozoic had it, and then they're like, Hearthstone, it's better, we'll just do it online. And that's when they finally become an actual, contender to the Wizards throne.
Well, there you go. So Konami still sucks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Speaking of other
video
things.
game companies that suck.
Yeah. Well, here's a company. Yeah, that's an interesting segue. It's kind of hard to say a company sucks because they never released the game. So I guess they really do kind of suck in a way. But we are now we're gonna have a moment to re-examine just what went wrong and how it pertains to preventable business expenses in the future, what was the word I actually... I actually had a word in my head and I just lost it. But we're going to talk about 38 Studios. For a brief history lesson, 38 Studios is a company that was founded in, was it 2010? 2006 in Massachusetts, by former Phillies, Red Sox, and Arizona Diamondbacks pitcher Curt Schilling, who is probably the second celebrity I can think of to have created his own video game company. He did all the things right, it would seem, just by looking at how he built the company. He had numerous people, business partners, people from the gaming industry, all conglomerating into this company, which was originally called Big Green Monster. And he claims that he did not call it that based on the wall from the old Boston Red Sox stadium. He said there was another reason for that, but I kind of find that hard to believe. He later changed it to name it after his jersey number. Whoop-de-doo. So here's a rundown of who he got involved with it. First off, he had a talk with his wife's uncle, who was a retired business exec, and he wanted to build a company just so he can build an MMORPG. He started off then getting people from other companies. He had Brett Close. I don't know exactly who he is, but then he had John Laff, who was formerly higher up from Electronic Arts. He's been with them for several years. Also, he had a ton of people. Jesus Christ, I'm losing all my information. Well, let's just cut to the chase. He started gathering up to about 300 or plus employees for this company, and then they got a subsidiary for another company called Big Huge Games, who would develop another game to coincide with their MMORPG. So they wanted to create a kind of a lore as well. So they brought in Salvador, who proceeded to write this incredible story for the game for Big Huge Games and for the untitled MMORPG, which would fit into the universe of the Kingdoms of Amalur, which is the game that was released by Big Huge Games. From what it sounds like, he did about 10,000 years worth of lore. That's a shitload of writing. But then again, that's almost par for the course for a game, let's say, like an MMORPG. I mean, World of Warcraft their lore is phenomenally huge. As well as, a game like, let's say, it's not running anymore, but Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning. And then, of course, for character designs, sprite designs, models, and all that stuff, they brought in monster expert himself, Todd McFarlane. Although, that doesn't, his designs don't exactly translate well to video game. I mean, you go from 2D art to, we're talking like early 2000 or late 2000s Xbox 360 PS3 era graphics. I mean, game design and graphical design was definitely picking up pretty well back then, but it's not on the level it is now in terms of detail and texture and all that stuff. The company was doing pretty well in terms of its startup, and then, of course, the biggest mistake of all time happens. The state of Massachusetts decides they want to get involved. They wanted to give them a loan to build this company up in their state to provide jobs, to show that they are interested in a job field that they think will help pioneer, I guess, the state in a way, to look like it's a place where people can build businesses and whatnot. So, Big Huge Games finally releases Kingdom of Amalur, which is published by Electronic Arts, and it doesn't get amazing sales. It gets good reviews. It's not an outstanding game. I enjoy the game personally, but it just doesn't do it for what EA was hoping for. It doesn't do it for what Big Huge Game and 38 Studios was hoping for. And at this time, 38 Studios is still deep in development of their MMORPG. However, somewhere around 2010, because they didn't make enough money off of Kingdom of Amalur, they started going into default. They owed the state tons of money. Checks were bouncing. At some point, somebody even went into their own personal account to pay the state off. Kurt Schilling went broke. He used up almost $50 million just to help pay off the debt that was going on. In the end, the company was seized by the state of Massachusetts, and a couple years later auctioned off, and I think they were hit with around $28 million loss, if I recall. And
it was just a big losing proposition for everyone involved.
It was. So here's the thing that I have a question on. So when is it a good idea for an entity as large as the government to get involved in investing in video game industry? We'll start with you, Mark.
Well, here's my thing. I don't think the government should be investing in business in general. I just don't think that the government should be attempting to directly associate itself with business entities. That kind of crosses a lot of really weird lines, to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's definitely a case where the government getting involved in utilities isn't the worst thing, and you can kind of sort of point and say, well, at what point do utilities stop being a business or start being a business? But that's really outside of the purview of this conversation. I don't want to get into a debate here. It's just that I think that if the government's going to put their hands on stuff like that, train companies, rail lines, electricity, water, those are entities where the government investing is not the worst thing. Video game companies, I feel like there's something to be said for the government offering artistic grants to gaming companies, because there are smaller companies who could desperately use a funding of the arts in some capacity or another to stay alive, to keep making small independent games that are artistically inclined. That'd be neat, I think. And I feel like the government should be in that kind of business in the same way that we fund the arts in general. I do not think that the government should be funding a Sega, funding a Sony, funding a Microsoft, funding anybody in game development as a business expenditure. You want to give them tax breaks or something? All right, that more power to you. We do that in business. That is an understood thing that happens. I definitely don't think that should be a thing where the government is trying to put their hands into it in that capacity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, well, we'll just go. Same question with you, Janice. What do you think?
No.
No. Simple answer. Thank you.
So, look, the thing about it is that like when it comes to entertainment value, you can't stop the government. Hey, this will be a big boon for our state to be able to get that massive influx of money. You give them, they give you back, because they knew at that time that video games was a big deal. It was a good amount of money that they could have spent for it. There's two corrections. First, it was not the state of Massachusetts, it was the state of Rhode Island. He moved from Massachusetts to Rhode Island, and Rhode Island was the one that fit him a
That's
large
right.
loan
Thank you for
to be
correcting
able to
me.
support that. The second part of it was that Kingdoms of Amalur was the reason that they got moved to Rhode Island, not the MMO. The MMO was a shadow in the eye of what actually 38 Studios was trying to do after the fact. He had a large number of employees, about 400 employees, that all, and I mean all, lost their jobs in one day. He flat out fired everybody. They defaulted on a $1 million payment back to the state of Rhode Island, and that just cascaded the entire company into just absolute ruin. Kurt Schilling's broke because of it. Like, he straight up is broke because of it. I remember Kurt actually was doing like press conference tours for a lot of different companies and a lot of different people, where he would go around and he was talking. The only even reason he even went to the government in the first place is because every single private investor that he went to with both the idea for the MMO and Kingdoms of Amalur got shot down. Every single one of them said, no, we're not interested. We're not going to buy. And so he actually went to, and this is the funny part, he was at the time decidedly democratic, but when he went to the government, he went to who was at the time in charge of the state, a Republican, for funding. I mean, that's political in nature, but as Pins and Screws says in chat, state governments get involved with movies all the time. Why would it be any different if they were getting involved with a game studio? I think in this case, the amount of money that was put in the expect for the return based on the loan payment was just too much. There was too much pressure. There was too much time constraint pushed onto it. Like, we've been playing and we've been looking and we've been reviewing and talking video games for I don't know how long. I'm sure we all have a massive amount of combined time together, the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
In that amount of time that we have dealt with that, how long do you honestly think it could actually feasibly take a small studio of only 400 people to develop 2 games at the same time?
It could take a long time, as a matter of fact. I mean, 450 people. I mean, there have been games that have been in development for 17 years.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but
so the baseline is that when you really look at it, so the thing about it, and this is the interesting side thing that I think is something that when I was looking a lot of this up is really just kind of important to me, but a lot of the reviewers, when they saw Kingdoms of Amalur, were like, this is WoW Light. This is basically WoW Light. Like, that's verbatim from at least 10 different other reviewers that I heard about this game. This is basically a light version of World of Warcraft, which at that point was already
10 million players in.
Exactly. You're 10 million players in, you're neck deep in the middle of Burning Crusade expansion, and they're like, this is basically an offline WoW, so this isn't bad, but it's not the best. It's like, it feels like there's things
I have to actually
better.
challenge that notion that it's a WoW light. I mean, cosmetically and lore-wise, the game feels like WoW. Gameplay-wise is a completely different beast, and I will contest that it plays nothing or similarly to WoW in any capacity whatsoever.
No, and I agree with that. Like, the game itself is action.
Mm-hmm. It's closer to a Beyond Good and Evil Zelda mashup, if anything.
I can see that. But the baseline is that the idea, like, if you were to conceptually take the entire game as a package, everyone was basically like, this is WoW Light. Like, this is basically what World of Warcraft was trying to do, but is a lot more action-y. And I get that. Like, I actually see that in a lot of what they were talking about, just from watching a lot of the videos and the limited amount of playtime I've actually had with the game. I could honestly say that a lot of times when you really come down to it, should the government have gotten involved? I don't think so. I don't know that video games can be in any way the same when it comes to funding as it would, say, for instance, movie. Hollywood is a totally different beast from Silicon Valley. You know that, I know that, we all know that. And video game companies are not something where you're going to be guaranteed a return. The game can look absolutely gorgeous on paper, and it can be ass in actual execution. We've seen that. I give you the example of Yooka-Laylee versus Hat in Time. So when it really comes down to it, a video game company isn't going to be a good investment unless they've already shown proven success. If a state were to say, "Hey, we're going to fund a bunch of money and we're going to funnel a bunch of money into, let's say another ailing American game company that's shown proven success, that has working, capital, that's not just going to be, we're good, now we're not, we defaulted and we're done." That's exactly what happened with 38 Studios. Kurt went into this blind, and he tried to gather as many people as he could who were from the industry or who that were big. I mean, R.L. Salvatore, Todd McFarlane, those are big names when you really think about it, but they're big names in their respective genre. They're not big names in the world of video games. And that, I think, is really where the fault lies. Not so much in the state of Rhode Island giving him money, but in the foresight or lack thereof of Kurt Schilling and 38 Studios from not looking for more help. I mean, EA is EA. Let's not knock that idea, but
I guess they should be lucky EA's not the one that bought them and closed them down.
No, state of Rhode Island is.
Now, this was a good point that you brought up, and it was something I did want to ask. Government not getting involved, but they are involved in the movie industry, and Kurt Schilling going around to the game industry and, pitching his idea and nobody biting at it, and him being, a celebrity, popular, famous pitcher, winning a couple of World Series. Why couldn't he get help from the game industry to finance his ideas, his game studio, and all that stuff? But Vin Diesel could. He has a turn.
Vin Diesel's a gamer.
He's a hardcore gamer, big, hardcore D&D player, and all that stuff. But he's also in the midst of creating a franchise himself, in the same vein that Kurt Schilling was doing with his MMORPG within the Kingdom of Amalur setting. I mean, he had the Riddick saga all planned out with both an anime, a movie franchise, and then he had a game. What was it? Visceral? Not Visceral. Tiger something was the name of his company. Mark, can you?
I don't remember the name of the company.
Here's the deal.
He has Collateral, but he has Collateral. He has a shitload of money to fall back on. So
that doesn't matter.
How does it work out for him to get? Because even though he can create a company, he still has to get other companies to back him. To publish his stuff, give him his company money to develop his stuff. What else does he have going for him? I mean, you could be a gamer all you want. That doesn't make you.
Well, it's not just financial collateral.
It's not collateral.
Right? It's social collateral as well. It's collateral within the industry.
Here's the difference.
Vin Diesel is Vin Diesel is a known property in gaming. I mean, you wouldn't think that he would be, but no, Vin Diesel is a known property in gaming. He's been associated with all of the Chronicles of Riddick games. He's been known to be a huge game fan dork for a while.
I mean, he plays D&D.
Yeah. So he's famous. He's financially well off. His name is notable. Not as notable as, some of the top people, and certainly not as notable as it was when he was first coming up. But Vin Diesel has legitimate star power in general as well as in the industry. Kurt Schilling is a sports star, a big important sports star, sure, but that doesn't translate well into gaming. That doesn't translate well in the entertainment world.
That's the difference between Kurt Schilling and Vin Diesel. Nobody And I mean, nobody knew who Kurt Schilling was unless you also followed baseball. And I can guarantee you that at the time in 2006, when he said this was going to be a thing that he was going to do, and he announced this game, and he went to Comic Cons and all these other things, do you know how many people they actually had to bring into the frickin' panel just to get the room filled? Nobody knew who Kurt Schilling was. You could line 10 people up, and maybe two of them knew who Kurt Schilling was. The other 8 would have just sat there, shrugged their shoulders, and go, I mean, it looks like an MMO, but we don't know who this guy is. Why do we care? And that's the difference. It has to do with the fact that nobody knew who Kurt Schilling was. And because of that, the whole system was doomed from the start. If he'd have been the guy that had set the capital forth and been able to get the state to do it, I don't think that he would have defaulted if he had another big name that actually had clout in the gaming industry in front of it. If he'd have put another face in front of this game, in front of the studio, besides himself, who knows what could have happened. We could have had another we could have had another MMO that probably could have rivaled what WoW was actually bringing to the game. You know, in terms of just MMOs in general. You know, who's to say we wouldn't be playing, you know, the Amalur MMO instead of 14 at this point? What ifs and, you know, buts, you know, or, you know, ifs and buts are candy and nuts, but what are you going to do when you put somebody that nobody knows in front of a game studio? They're going to look at this and go, oh, look, a sports star's trying to be a video gamer. Get out of here. Go play your baseball, sportsman.
Right, it's like it's like the equivalent of Chris Cluey trying to start up a video game company. I love Chris. I think he's entertaining. But if he had tried to make a video game company, he'd been like, "Who the fuck are you?"
I am,
you know. And it's we know who he is within the gaming side of things because he a big old dork. But
right.
Like nobody knows who Chris Cluey is outside of sports fans and video gamers. Kurt Schilling didn't even have the video gamers side of things. I mean, he was a fine baseball player, but he also wasn't that sort of transcendent sports star that everybody knows. If Kobe Bryant went and said, I want to make a video game company, if LeBron James said, I want to make a video game company, if Michael Jordan or Shaquille O'Neal said they wanted to make a video game company, fucking Shaquille O'Neal said, I want to make another Shaq Fu, and people
it's
were
happening.
Like, yeah, let that happen.
Shaq Fu's a thing again, actually, so that's a thing, you know, it's like, but he didn't want to make a company, he's just like, I just want to remake Shaq Fu, I thought it was a neat idea, and instead of it being a side beat 'em up, it's like a action platformer.
It's like a beat 'em up sort of thing.
It's a beat 'em up.
Yeah, it actually looks really decent instead of a fighting game.
It doesn't take itself seriously. That's probably why.
Exactly. Well, neither did the original. I mean, it was a 2D. It wasn't even a
2D fighter.
It was like a Street Fighter clone, basically, and it wasn't
a really bad Street Fighter clone.
Yeah.
Well, Super Nintendo. What are you gonna do? But the baseline is that's the same thing. You could put if the name is universally known, then sure. And I think that's what he was banking on. I think he was banking on the fact that he had universally well-known names, just not universally well-known names in the gaming world. I mean, sure, you could say I got R.L. Salvatore doing all of my story, and I've got Todd McFarlane doing all of my assets. Like, literally, all of his assets, the backgrounds, the characters, the sprite, the artwork, the storyboarding, that was all Todd McFarlane and his crew. And it's like, that's a great idea.
The only question is was there a toy line?
Exactly. It's like, except for the fact that the things that you wanted from those specific names, like, oh, great, R.L. Salvatore is doing 10,000 years worth of lore for Kingdoms of Amalur. When do we get to actually read the book for that? Oh, Todd McFarlane is going to be doing a video game. Great. When do we get the actual character models in figures for that? When do we actually get to put our hands on the things that we already know Todd McFarlane does? Because that's what we expect from them, not a video game.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the case of what they did, they took people who work in a tangible field, books, figures, comic books, movies, and they put them in front of a screen to make a video game out of it. I mean, that's not the same as saying that, a pound of feathers is the same as a pound of steel. Sorry. It's not, because it's not the same. At that point, it's not a pound of feathers, it's an ounce of feathers and a pound of steel, and you just don't have the weight anymore.
Okay, so obviously, just from the get-go, it was a bad idea. What do you think... Now this is hypothetical thinking right here. in the midst of, let's say, the era of 38 Studios' existence, what do you think he could have, Kurt Schilling and his executives could have done during the existence of the company to, correct itself, to set the ship right, to keep it from,
probably
its
would have
inevitable
helped if
doom?
Kurt Schilling had known how to do business in general.
It would have been
Well,
helpful, yes.
honestly,
Like this is the thing. It's if you don't understand how to do business, it doesn't matter how much of a genius you are, how many great ideas you have. And as a collective group of like crossover wrestling fans here, we all know where I'm going with this. Paul Heyman,
yeah,
one of the biggest writing geniuses in the world of professional wrestling, but ECW shit the bed because he didn't understand how to do business. They had television, they had video games. It didn't matter.
I think that if this were something that were going to happen and some big but mid-level baseline athlete or all-star or movie star for even decided, hey, I'm going to make a video game company and I'm going to put out a video game, put out a big, huge project, PR. It's all about the PR. And that's great that they're going to do that. Put someone else in front of the cameras. And I'll give you probably the best example of that. Mike Morhaime and Chris Metzen. Mike Morhaime was the guy who's running the show, but Chris Metzen was his face man, and he, A, knew how to get the people to like him, and B, knew how to get the people to want to play the game. That's the thing that happened. That should have happened with Kurt Schilling. Kurt Schilling had even an inkling of business sense, even a tiny inkling of business sense. He would have gone first thing to the gaming industry and found somebody to be his face man for the game. Because without that, he has no credence. He has literally, as it's been said in the chat, he has literally no collateral outside of the fact that he has cash. And that's it.
And a couple World Series rings.
I mean, Kurt Schilling is Kurt Schilling is Kurt Schilling. That's great. 9 out of 10 people don't give a shit that it's Kurt Schilling. They give a shit whether or not the game is good, and that the game itself is hyped, and the game itself has the ability to be more, or have that potential to really draw you in and really want you to enjoy the story. It's really kind of a shame that the game itself ended up being as generic as it was, because there was a lot of room for improvement, and there was a lot of room for additional push that could have just made that game phenomenal. But again, like you said, and we've said pretty much this entire show, is no business. He didn't put the right foot forward, and money is money, and his name means a lot in the sports world, but it doesn't mean shit in the video game world, because, like I said, Kurt who? Schilling what? Red Sox? What is that? Why are you mixing whites and reds in the laundry? Nobody cares.
I mean, not only that, it's even if you are smart about business, or even if you are notable in the industry, it doesn't mean that you have a plan that's any good, that's going to win. Palladium basically just went out of business for all intents and purposes because they attempted to do a Robotech miniatures game, and the first round of it apparently went great. They did a Kickstarter, they did a first wave that was really good, and then they just recently, like in the past week and a half, released a statement. It's like 2 weeks, saying that they're not going to be able to complete the second wave because they made a shitload of bad business decisions, and like their ability to even make the things in the first place was hampered, and then they lost the Robotech license finally. It doesn't matter how many people they have as the public faces of the company. It doesn't matter how many good decisions they make on the front end of things. Kurt Schilling didn't have a good business model. If he had had a good business model, they could have taken the money that they had gotten and made it into something. They had a terrible business model on top of having no people associated. Because if you'd had a good business model, it wouldn't have mattered that the government put money into that game. They would have been able to get that business going. They would have been able to sell that product. They would have been able to make a name for themselves. They would have been able to release the game that he wanted to release. And they just went ass over tea kettle the whole way down. They hit, as we would say in Final Fantasy XIV, every single mechanic on the way down to hell, because they just failed. Every single aspect of this was screwed, kind of from start to finish.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so before we wrap things up here, have either of you ever had a chance to play Kingdoms of Amalur? I don't remember if you did, Mark.
I have not.
How about
I have
you?
never been interested in playing it.
Very little. I got maybe about an hour's worth of playtime with it.
Okay. I was thinking about bringing up the idea of doing the video game book club thing again. Would you two be interested in one for Kingdoms of Amalur? You know, we could tear this game apart next episode or two.
What is it even on?
Every
$20
platform.
on Steam.
Is it on Steam?
Yep.
$20.
Okay, I'll have to take a look for that. I mean, yeah. I mean, if that's what we're looking to do, then yeah, I'll give it a shake. I'm always willing to give it a fair shake. I mean, I'm willing to give anything a fair shake. I mean,
Okay.
as I said at the top of the show, Metal Gear Survive, I gave it a fair shake.
All right. Well, anyway, so we're rounding out the end of our show here, and did you guys want to do any plugs real quick before we end our show tonight?
I mean, I stream every Saturday, usually starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over at twitch.tv/MarkBWriting. This past week, we did some streaming of us bird farming in Final Fantasy XIV. Probably sometime in the future, I'm going to do more XCOM 2 and, just general coverage of games that come out that I want to play and do something with. But I don't have anything in particular lined up at the moment.
Okay, how about you, Jan?
I'm still doing my Friday Saturdays nonsense. I usually go 8:30 Central on Fridays and Saturdays. At this point, there's a couple of things I actually wanted to touch on. Yes, thank you for reminding me. My Friday night stream has been turned into sort of like a variety night. Mobile, 14, Monster Hunter, and a couple of other like small games that I've just like. I picked up a game on Steam recently called Tiny Metal. It's kind of like the spiritual successor to Advance Wars, which I am actually really enjoying because Advance Wars is probably by far one of my best, one of my favorite tactics.
I haven't
games
played
of
that
all time.
franchise in a while, but I enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. But this is basically the spiritual successor to that. And then, actually, as it turns out, last Friday, a lot of us and Mark, you and I were even talking about this. We had a bit of a breakdown of just like, hey, what are thinking of times and games from this era, from that 2000, that 99 to 2000 era with a bunch of our friends on one of our other Discord channels. We started going down and breaking down like a bunch of different RPG series, to which we started talking about Valkyrie Profile, which was Enix and Trius's little darling from 1999 and 2000 for the PlayStation 1. It had a sequel on PS2. It had a couple of spin-offs, one for a remake. Well, it wasn't really a remake. It was basically an update for 2006 for the PSP called Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, which was basically a remake of... Well, it wasn't really a remake either. It was basically just a port from the PS1 to the PSP. And then they also released...
Slightly prettier.
It was. It had a couple of additional cutscenes and things that weren't in the original PS1 version, which was kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
They also released Valkyrie Profile... something of the plume on the DS.
Slamera or what have you.
Well, no, Slamera was a PS2. They also released a DS game, something of the plume. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I didn't really get
The strategy game, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then they also have a mobile version called Valkyrie Profile Automatia, which isn't terrible. It has a lot of remixes. It's actually kind of a pretty looking mobile game for the Valkyrie Profile series that Square Enix released recently. I think it's about a year old now. But that Friday, Square Enix released a teaser for Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, which is shaping up to, in my hope, be a remake of the original Valkyrie profile. A lot of people
I'd be down for that.
Very skeptical as far as what it is. It's about a minute long. IGN posted it. It's up on their YouTube. It's kind of a big deal for me because a lot of people are like, well, what's your favorite RPG of all time? And the very first thing I'm going to say is Valkyrie Profile. Valkyrie Profile was probably the very first game that I ever played JRPG in turn. It's the very first JRPG that I ever played all the way through and actually went through to get 100% completion in. So it actually holds a very special place in my heart for me. So what I've decided to do and what I'm going to be doing for the next few weeks is my Saturday stream is actually going to be devoted entirely to completing a chapter a week in the original PS1 version of Valkyrie Profile on PS1.
I forget how many chapters there are in the game. It's what,
8.
15? Oh, 8. Okay, I was way
there's
off.
8 chapters. There's 8 chapters.
And there's a countdown mechanic to the game, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, the way the baseline of the game is that Ragnarok is about to happen, and you've been reactivated as the Valkyrie Lenneth to obtain human souls for warriors to be sent up to Asgard to help combat the Vanir and other forces from stopping the Aesir from being able to survive after Ragnarok occurred. And of course, you go through the storyline of finding the souls and then learning of the treachery behind the scenes. So that's actually something that I'm going to be doing on my Saturday streams going forward. Is pretty much just concentrating purely on replaying Valkyrie Profile 1 after the announcement of the whatever Square Enix is going to be doing with Valkyrie Profile Lenneth. A lot of people are saying it's going to be just an update and a remaster. I'm actually really super hoping that it's going to be a remake. Obviously, with the newer technology and the PS4 and things of that nature, there's always a possibility of a PC release as well. But the baseline is that if it's a remake, I
always feel like it should be a instead of 3D graphics or anything like that. I always had the first game when I played it, it gave me the feeling like it was more of an anime niche RPG, and I feel if anything, the characters should be like hand drawn. For both combat and for like when you're exploring the 2D worlds.
I think that the idea behind it is that, well, if you actually go back and you look at the original, it was the original Valkyrie Profile on PS1 was purely 2D. It was all hand drawn. It was all animated sprites, and the only time that you ever really had any sort of 3D or animation. No. In the first one, there were certain sequences where you'd have 3D rendered backgrounds with small animated 3D cutscenes that would occur, like doors opening, things like that. And they interwove that into the actual game. Like if you were opening up a door, you could tell that it would go into a short loading sequence and actually it would actually have a 3D animated door open for you to enter into certain areas. Like a gate opening or a door opening in a dungeon. That was actually a 3D graphic overlay in the 2D world that would be a separate asset to actually open that door and swing open. So it was really the first time I had ever seen something like that was so seamlessly integrated into the core gameplay. But yeah, honestly, that's pretty much what I've been doing. It's like, I'm just doing varieties on Friday, and then my Saturday stream is going to end at the Valkyrie Profile for a while. Yay!
So I'll definitely check out the Valkyrie Profiles stream when you get a chance to start doing it. For me, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are still the same. Tuesdays is Game Jam where me and Lance and anybody else that's interested will be playing some multiplayer games. We've lately been playing a lot of Black Desert Online. We're probably going to play... some Monster Hunter World because he just went and recently picked that up, so that should be fun. I think it's his first Monster Hunter game. We'll see how that turns out for him. Wednesdays is still 3 Vets and a Noob. We're still embarking on our quest through Borderlands 2 with 2 hours of comedy and camaraderie, dick and fart jokes pretty much. And Mondays, alternatively, is GVN Live. I have canceled my Free Step Dodge Dead or Alive 5 tournament, so alternate Mondays are now open, so I'll probably stream just whatever the hell I want. Last night, I was streaming some Brutal Doom 64, which is a fucking awesome game mod. Gory bits and everything. It's amazing. I don't know how you take a great game like Doom 64 and you make it better. Well, motherfuckers did it. So it was a blast. I might stream it some more tonight at the conclusion of my show, our show. So without further ado, though, I do want to thank everyone for tuning in. Man, I'm just yawning a lot. I want to thank you, Jan and Mark, for joining us tonight joining tonight, and this was actually a fun night. I had a lot of fun with the conversations that we had. Thank you guys.
Oh, once again, thank you for having us.
And with that, hey, if you like what we're doing in here, please hit the subscribe button. Well, not the subscribe button. Hit the follow button, and please tweet whenever we are going live, so that we can entertain the masses with our wonderful commentary. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
Good night.